It is that time of year, everybody. We've made it to the NFL Combine. And with that being said, I figured since I haven't uploaded a mock draft this year, now is a better time than the present. I apologize that I have not uploaded any NFL draft related content yet. Normally I start in January. Here it's the end of February. The reason for that is I've been trying to figure out how exactly I want to do my draft content this year. I wish I created a better plan earlier, but I figured with the Combine today, I've got to get something here. So I'm still kind of figuring out exactly how I'm going to be doing my mock drafts for the remainder of this cycle. But I figured for today, it'll be a normal one-round mock without trades. And keep in mind, this is predictive, not necessarily what I would do if I was these teams, but more so what I believe will end up happening. So let's not waste any time and let's get this show on the road. So with the number one pick this year, it feels like there's not a clear and concise choice, which should make this draft cycle quite interesting over the next couple of months. It seems like right now the Titans would pick either one of the quarterbacks or Abdul Carter, or potentially look to move back. That could always be an option as well. It feels like Carter is kind of the favorite, or at least amongst the mainstream draft media. I disagree. For right now, I'm going to have them pick Cam Ward, the quarterback out of the University of Miami. And the reasoning is that it's a quarterback-driven league, and I think Cam Ward has shown that he is talented enough to potentially have the upside of elevating an NFL offense. Will Levis hasn't really shown that he can do just about anything at a consistent level, and the Titans may never get this good of an opportunity again to where they don't have to move up and mortgage assets to get a legitimately good quarterback prospect. So I kind of lean this being the move. Again, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they don't, whether somebody moves up for him or the Titans just pick Abdul Carter. Certainly should be fascinating, but for right now, I'm going to have them pick Cam Ward. Browns at number 2 will not pick a quarterback. They're going to pick Abdul Carter out of Penn State. And I think whether or not Myles Garrett stays is pretty irrelevant with this pick. I kind of lean that he will, but regardless, I think Abdul Carter makes some sense here. A freakishly athletic edge rusher with loads of upside, an ascending young player who's only played the position for 1 year and showed terrific flashes with Penn State as one of the more dominant pass rushers in college football last year. Now, you can easily make the same argument for Cleveland that I did with the Titans, that it's a QB-driven league, and Shedeur Sanders is right there for the taking. They're still paying Deshaun Watson a lot of money. I don't think they're necessarily counting on him anymore to be the franchise quarterback, given that he just had the Achilles injury. And even more than that, he is a putrid football player. I still had them passing on a quarterback here because I could see the Browns looking at a veteran. They've been linked with Kirk Cousins. Sam Darnold could be in play. They could try to figure it out with Deshaun Watson again. This is still the same regime who traded 3 first-round picks to get him. And I think they would really be enamored with the idea of pairing Carter with Myles Garrett and eventually Carter being the long-term number 1 edge rusher of the future. But again, if they pick one of the QBs here, it obviously would not surprise me in the slightest. Shedeur Sanders goes at number 3 to the New York Giants. I don't think the Giants have any quarterbacks under contract as of now, and it's pretty obvious that they have to make a needle-moving move at this position, whether that's signing Sam Darnold, maybe Justin Fields, or picking one in the first round. The question is, do either of those free agents move the needle enough? Does Sam Darnold have the ability to elevate this team? We saw how good he was last year, but is that because he was in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, or has he legitimately been resurrected? In the case of a Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, those guys are still bottom of the barrel starters. Does that take the Giants from where they are now? They've been linked with Matthew Stafford. It seems like there's some real buzz that a Matthew Stafford trade might happen. Are we sure he's going to be okay with going to the Giants, though? I imagine the Rams are going to do him right. He's an older player. He won a Super Bowl for them. I don't think they're going to trade him to the Giants if he really does not want to go there. So I certainly wouldn't bank on that. And with Shedeur Sanders falling here, it feels like a no-brainer pick. Now, again, we're going to have a clearer painted picture depending on what the Giants do at the position in free agency. I could see them look to bring in a veteran, say a Russell Wilson, and still do this at number 3 overall, at the very least, so they can have their rookie compete for the job and have a mentor to learn behind. In the case of Shedeur Sanders, I personally believe that he is a tick behind Cam Ward in this draft, and it seems like much of the NFL agrees with that. But the Giants don't really have a choice here. Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are fighting for their jobs. It feels like if this is how the board plays out, this will be the pick. Would not surprise me to see them move up a spot or two to get the quarterback that they prefer. Number 4, New England picks Travis Hunter, the two-way player out of Colorado. It seems like some teams view him as a corner, some view him as a receiver. So nonetheless, it's going to be very fascinating to see where he ends up. I think he certainly is good enough to play either spot. I'm not convinced he will play both in the NFL. That just seems virtually impossible to do. We said the same thing about that in college, though, and obviously he was able to do it. So I'm not going to rule it out, but I wouldn't call it particularly likely. If I had to guess, I think it makes a little more sense for him in the future to play receiver. He is certainly good enough. He's certainly explosive enough with the ball in his hands. Receivers get paid more money. And I think here with the New England Patriots, they need some firepower on offense more than they need another corner defensively. When the Patriots won that last game with Joe Milton, it kind of seemed like they screwed themselves out of getting Travis Hunter, but it works out here at number 4. I'm really starting to think as time goes on, it's more and more likely that Hunter does not go in the top 3, and New England at 4, there's no reason really to pass on him. So this feels like the pick in the first round that I'm the most confident in at this point in time. I would be surprised if those 4 players are not the first 4 off the board in some order, and I think the draft really opens up at number 5 with the Jaguars. There's a lot of different ways they could go with, but they're going to play it safe here with Mason Graham. I think this would be the right choice. New regime coming in, new head coach, new general manager, wanting to build from the trenches, and they already have some talent up front. Josh Hines-Allen, we know, is a phenomenal pass rusher. Trayvon Walker has had his ups and downs, but he's a competent NFL starter. Mason Smith, they drafted in the second round last year. I think he's got a ways to go, but there is some potential. Nonetheless, I think adding Mason Graham, someone who I think will be able to really wreak some havoc on day one, makes a lot of sense. Dynamic football player up front. I think he's someone who can help revive the culture in Jacksonville. And I think given how this would be the board playing out, I think this will be the right choice for the Jaguars. Tetairoa McMillan and Will Johnson I'm going to talk about a little bit together. Tet goes number 6 to the Raiders. Will Johnson goes number 7 to the Jets. Both of these guys were viewed as top prospects going into the year, and that didn't really change. Tet McMillan had another phenomenal season, while Will Johnson was largely banged up, but he didn't do anything to push his stock down. However, both of these guys have been mocked not consistently in the top 10. McMillan in particular, over the last month or so, many of the mainstream draft analysts, including Daniel Jeremiah, Mel Kiper, etc., these guys who have sources in the league and talk to people in NFL buildings, those guys have Tetairoa McMillan in the middle of the first round or later. I know Jeremiah had him at number 19 to the Bucks. I think I've seen him as late as 21 to the Steelers. So it seems like there is some real chatter about Tet McMillan taking a dip towards the mid to late portion of the first round. So I'm certainly keeping my eyes and ears open regarding that, but I'm not comfortable enough with doing that. I think Tet McMillan is the best receiver prospect in this draft. 6'5", moves smoothly for his frame. Highly productive player over the last 2 years at the University of Arizona. And the Raiders, I think adding another big-time perimeter threat with Brock Bowers at tight end would be really fun. They've been linked to Sam Darnold. Apparently Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford both have ski resorts in the great state of Montana and happened to run into each other a couple days ago. I'm not buying that in the slightest. It seems like their conversation was planned. But nonetheless, Tom Brady's trying to pitch Matthew Stafford on the idea of playing for the Las Vegas Raiders. So I think if you get Stafford without trading this 6th pick, which is possible, you have Brock Bowers at tight end, who has a chance to be the best player at that position in the league next year, and then you add Tetairoa McMillan, along with Jakobi Meyers, who I think is one of the more underrated players in the league. You've got yourselves a receiving core. Whoever plays at the quarterback position there is going to have some real weapons to throw the ball to. And then Will Johnson at number 7 to the New York Jets. They hired Aaron Glenn from Detroit, obviously played cornerback in the NFL, a big piece in the development of many of the Lions secondary players, Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch. I think we're going to see Terrion Arnold come along next year, largely because of working with Aaron Glenn. I could see the Jets really trying to prioritize the secondary early, and Will Johnson would make a lot of sense here. DJ Reed is a free agent. It seems like he's voiced his frustrations through the internet. Wouldn't be surprised to see him walk. They already have Michael Carter in the slot. Obviously, Sauce Gardner on one of the outside spots. He's a phenomenal player. But you plug in Will Johnson, and that gives you one of the deadliest cornerback trios in the NFL. And a 1-2 punch on the outside of Sauce and Will Johnson. If Johnson hits his upside, I mean, how are you going to throw the ball against that secondary? I think another thing going for both McMillan and Johnson is that the receiver and cornerback positions in this class are a little bit lackluster compared to recent seasons. It seems like there isn't really a clear wide receiver 2, and there isn't really a clear cornerback 2, because most of the prospects in that range are late first, early second round guys. So because of that, I think that helps both McMillan and Johnson keep themselves in the top 10. Then at number 8, maybe the first surprise pick. I don't really know. It's Jalen Walker, the edge linebacker hybrid out of Georgia. Seems like his stock is all over the place for certain people, but it seems like the mainstream media draft heads have him early in the first round, and I fully believe it. I am buying Jalen Walker's stock. I think the upside is really, really exciting. The versatility is really, really exciting, and I'm fascinated to see how he will be used in the NFL, and I actually trust the Carolina Panthers to get this right. Ejiro Evero is a solid defensive coordinator, and I think Jalen Walker is going to be a really fun chess piece on this defense. Maybe they try to use him more as a traditional hand-in-the-dirt edge rusher, like how Dallas turned Micah Parsons into. Not saying he's going to become Micah Parsons, but whether he's that, whether he gets reps at linebacker, he even mentioned during his combine interview he can play in the nickel. Wherever Carolina wants to play him, I think he's going to be a really good player, and I would be on board with this pick at number 8. That brings us to the New Orleans Saints here at number 9, and I had them selecting Mykel Williams, the big edge rusher out of the University of Georgia. Back-to-back Bulldog defenders off the board here in the top 10. Williams is a fascinating player because the traits are certainly there. Solid run defender, certainly looking for more consistency as a pass rusher, but the upside is definitely there with him. The Saints have failed at drafting and developing early round defensive linemen in recent years. I think the jury's still out on Brian Brzee, but Isaiah Foskey's been a not-so-good pick. Peyton Turner in the first round was a complete whiff. There's probably a couple other examples that are not coming to the top of my head, but nonetheless, the Saints have not done a good job of developing the defensive line, but they've shown a willingness to try. They've used a lot of early picks on the defensive line within the last few years, and I don't think they'll be afraid to do so again here at number 9. The upside is definitely there with Williams, but I think they're going to have to be patient. Will Campbell slides to number 10. The Chicago Bears certainly will not complain as he ends up being the top offensive lineman off the board. Will he play guard? Will he play tackle at the next level? I think is to be foreseen. I would imagine the Bears are certainly going to try him at tackle at first and keep him there unless it fails and then slide him inside. The number one goal has to be protecting Caleb Williams, and I think they would be doing a disservice if this pick is not an offensive lineman. It very well could be Ashton Jeanty, but this is such a deep running back class down the board. You can pick someone in the second round. They have 2 second-round picks, so there's no reason not to get someone like a Caleb Johnson in round 2. Trevion Henderson, maybe Quinshon Judkins. Maybe you package those to move up for a Marion Hampton. Plenty of solid options for them later. They don't have to force themselves into the running back pick at number 10. Armin Membu out of Missouri goes number 11 to the 49ers, one of the biggest draft risers since the start of the year. Membu had a phenomenal junior season. The Niners could use a right tackle, and Trent Williams on the left side, he's not getting any younger, and it seems like he's finally showing a little bit of regression. Still obviously a good player, but he's only got so much time left in the NFL. And I think with the addition here of Membu, that certainly should make the offensive line quite a bit better for them. Ashton Jeanty is the pick at number 12 to the Dallas Cowboys. This has been a very common pairing of team and player. I see some people trying to go against it. Maybe Dallas picks a wide receiver. We know they love to invest on the offensive line with Zach Martin retiring. That could be in play. But I think Jerry recognizes he needs to take a big swing after not really trying at all last year in free agency and the fan base rightfully coming after his head. I think the Cowboys are going to try to be aggressive in this offseason, and I think Jeanty is a guy who can reinvigorate some hope in a team that doesn't really have much going for them right now. had a phenomenal junior season, obviously, with Boise State. Many people felt like he should have won the Heisman. I think in a normal season, he does win the Heisman. And I think he projects well at the NFL level. His balance, his body control at his size is second to none. And we know he's got a second gear that once he's in the open space, it's hard to catch him. I think he's got a strong chance to be one of the 10 best running backs in the NFL the second he signs the contract. I think this pick makes a lot of sense for the Cowboys. And if he falls here, I don't think he's making past 12. Kelvin Banks goes number 13 overall to the Miami Dolphins. Seems like a lot of people kind of viewed him as a consensus top 10 pick throughout the season. I don't see it that way. I could see him going a little bit later than this even. But with Campbell and M'Boue off the board, I think Banks is the choice here for the Dolphins at number 13. Teron Armstead's future with the team seems questionable. It seems like he's considering retirement. I think whether or not he sticks around, it's no secret that the Dolphins have done a horrible job of investing in the offensive line, and picking Banks here at number 13 can look to shore that up, whether it's at tackle or guard at the next level. Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, to the Colts at number 14. Another very common fit of team and player, much like Genty at number 12. I know this seems like a broken record because just about everybody has mocked this fit, but I think it makes a ton of sense. You had a guy in Warren who was used in so many different ways in the Penn State offense last year at tight end, in line, in the slot, at running back, hell, even at quarterback. I would love to see the Colts find a variety of different ways to use him. He was basically a Taysom Hill, but on steroids for Penn State a year ago. I'm really hoping he ends up in Denver. I think the way Sean Payton would use him would be really fun, but I don't think he's going to make it to Denver at number 20. I don't think he falls much later than this. What a senior season that Tyler Warren had, and I think the Colts at number 14, looking to make a splash on this offense, makes a lot of sense. They have a good group of skill position players as is. Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs can really play. Hoping for a better second season out of Adonai Mitchell. But this gives them something they don't have, and I think it would make a lot of sense. Mike Green at number 15 to the Atlanta Falcons. Small school guy from Marshall, but had a fantastic sophomore season. Looked like the real deal at the Senior Bowl, not only cementing him in the first round, but I think a top half of the first round guy. There are some off-field rumors of why he got kicked off at Virginia. You can Google them for yourself, but it ain't pretty. So I imagine NFL teams are certainly going to be diving deep into that. And if the character and previous accusations come back clean, I think he does go in the top half of the first round. The Falcons have neglected drafting defensive line in the first and second round in the Terry Fontenot era. And I think his job is starting to get a little bit less safe. I think they're certainly going to have to add to this defense after really prioritizing the offense, particularly the skill positions, early in their drafts in recent years. I think if Mike Green falls here, it would make a lot of sense. And then Walter Nolan at number 16 out of Ole Miss to the Cardinals. I'm all in on Walter Nolan, the former number one recruit, started at Texas A&M for 2 years, was very up and down, questions of effort, questions of consistency, questions of character even. Transfers to Ole Miss, and I thought he really put some things together this year. I think the upside with him is really, really high, and I like this fit with the Cardinals. Jonathan Gannon looking to build that front, that defensive line. It seems like more people are on board with Walter Nolan in the first round, and as I said, I am completely about it. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go even higher than this, but if you're not mocking Walter Nolan in the first round, you've got to get with the program. He is a legitimately great defensive tackle prospect, and I would love this pick for the Cardinals at number 16. Every time the Bengals are mocked an offensive player, I cringe inside. I don't know how anyone could have watched that defense last year and say, let's give the Bengals a number 3 receiver. Kenneth Grant will be the pick here at number 17 overall. I think he's been overshadowed by Mason Graham on that Michigan defensive line, and understandably so. Mason Graham is a total stud. But Kenneth Grant is really, really good too. Pairing him up with his former Michigan teammate inside Chris Jenkins, a player who I still have a lot of belief in. Few former Michigan guys on that defense. DJ Turner's there, Dax Hill is there. A lot of Michigan players on the Bengals defense, which isn't a bad strategy. They've had some good defenses over the years. But I think Kenneth Grant will at least help solve some of the problems that this team has, and I think him with Trey Hendrickson and others on that defensive line could certainly be a strong group. Tyler Booker at number 18 to the Seattle Seahawks. I think Seattle has to pick an offensive lineman here in the first round, and with Tyler Booker falling, certainly works out. Plug and play starter at guard. I think he's got a good chance to be one of the 10 best pure football players in the draft. Another guy who I think is being overlooked because of his positional value, but Seattle certainly will not complain. Jihad Campbell at number 19 to the Buccaneers. He's a really intriguing player, a guy who can be used in a variety of different ways. And I look at the Bucs, a team who has strongly valued off-ball linebacker over the years. They drafted Devin White, number 5 overall, for a reason. Lavonte David is still good, but he's getting older. I could see the Bucs looking to draft another guy to put in the middle of that defense. I know they were super interested in Jack Campbell a couple of years ago. When they had picked Kalijah Kancey, Campbell was the backup option. So even in recent years, they're not afraid to use a first-round pick on a linebacker. They didn't get Jay Campbell 2 years ago because they're going to get it now with Jihad Campbell. Colston Loveland at number 20, the tight end out of Michigan, to the Denver Broncos. I think he's got a little more pure upside as a vertical receiver than Tyler Warren. Certainly wasn't used in all the ways that Penn State used Warren. But when Loveland has been on the field, he's been a really good player for Michigan over the years, was banged up this year. But I think he still is certainly warranting of a first-round pick. I think the Broncos are certainly going to look to add some offensive firepower with this pick. It looks like they've got a really solid quarterback with Bo Nix, but they need to supply him with the weaponry. And I think adding Colston Loveland to this offense would make a lot of sense. Obviously, Sean Payton has a good history with tight ends. Look at Jimmy Graham in New Orleans. If Colston Loveland can give a fraction of that production, then this pick will certainly be a win. Emeka Egbuka to the Steelers at number 21 overall. George Pickens looks like the real deal. I imagine they work out an extension regardless if he's back long-term or not. They need to add another guy to that offense in the passing game. I imagine they have a plan at quarterback because they recognize they're not going to get one of the top guys in this draft. They're certainly going to look for a veteran, whether that's retaining run of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. Maybe they're all in on Matthew Stafford. I think this is the landing spot that makes the most sense. And if that is the case, I imagine pick 21 would be headed to the Rams. But nonetheless, they have a plan, I think, at quarterback. It's a smart organization. They know what they're doing. So I think adding another weapon with Emeka Egbuka to take some of the load and the pressure off of George Pickens would make a lot of sense. For me, I think Egbuka will be my wide receiver too. Really consistent player. I think you know what you're getting with him. Will he ever be a top 7 or 8 receiver in the league? No, probably not. But the Steelers don't need him to be their number 1. They need him to be a high-end 2. And I think that's exactly what you're getting with Emeka Egbuka. Shemar Stewart, the edge rusher out of Texas A&M, goes to the Chargers at 22. I'm fascinated to see where he ends up because even though the sack production wasn't there, he only had 2 a year ago. I think the upside is still very much sky high with Stewart, a former 5-star recruit in that loaded 2022 recruiting class. And well, he's the only one of like the 10 of them who have stuck with Texas A&M. And even though the sacks aren't there, the reps have shown a ton of flashes. He had some good moments at the Senior Bowl. And I wouldn't worry about the stats. It's more so the film doesn't lie and the numbers do. I like the Chargers' ability to develop and get the most out of players in that Jim Harbaugh culture. And I think this would be a solid pick here at number 22 overall. Isaiah Thomas, cornerback out of Florida State to the Packers. He ends up being my CB2. Seems like a lot of people are starting to jump on the bandwagon. Maybe not first round necessarily, but I'm in on it. I thought he had a phenomenal season with the Seminoles. One of the few bright spots for that team and a player who's been developing nicely over the past couple of seasons. The Packers are going to be picking a cornerback early. As we look at their needs, they could look to add a receiver, but it's Brian Gutekunst. They're not picking a receiver in the first round. I think defensive line is in play. I would have definitely thought about Shemar Stewart at this spot, but he was just picked. And I think corner is going to be a need. It looks like the Eric Stokes thing certainly has not worked out. He's a free agent. He'll probably be out the door. Jair Alexander appears to be on his way out as well via a trade. So I think Thomas here at this spot makes a lot of sense. And I think once we get closer to draft time, more people are going to have him as the second corner behind Will Johnson. Malachi Starks, finally off the board at number 24 to the Vikings. He's a fascinating player because obviously he's quite good. But again, positional value. And there's a few spots I thought about in the first round, as high as number 13 with the Dolphins. But some of those not as good teams, like the Dolphins, have big needs at more pressing positions, such as offensive tackle. So because of that, he's kind of pushed down the board a little bit. And I look at the Minnesota Vikings, a roster that projects out to not have too many holes to where they can afford to make this pick. Cam Bynum is not under contract. He might be gone. He was an important part of that defense last year. So replacing him with Malachi Starks, I think would be a really solid move here at number 24. Let's wrap things up now. At number 25, the Texans select Gray Zabel, offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. I didn't list him as a tackle because, well, he can play just about anywhere, whether it's tackle, guard, center. And the Texans need just about anything on that offensive line because C.J. Stroud had absolutely no time to throw it way too often last year. They've got to give him more protection. Gray Zabel looked the part at the Senior Bowl against, obviously, guys who played at higher levels of competition, suggesting that he certainly could go in the first round. And the Texans make a lot of sense. They could use almost anything on that offensive line. Josh Conerly, offensive tackle out of Oregon, goes to the Rams. I'm all in on Conerly. I think he has a chance to be the best offensive lineman in this year's draft. His consistent improvement and improved production at Oregon suggests that he's developing at a very fine pace, and I trust the Rams to get the most out of him. They've done a good job of developing later round offensive linemen. Now they add Conerly here in the first round. I think this will be a great pick. Jahdae Barron goes to the Ravens. May not look like a huge position of need, but the Ravens love guys who can play at multiple different spots on the defense. And Jahdae Barron can play anywhere in the secondary, whether it's at nickel corner, some reps at outside corner, maybe at safety as well. He was arguably the most productive defensive back in the country last year, and I'm not fully sure how the Ravens are going to use him. But I imagine they will figure out some creative way to get him on the field and have him make a huge impact. He's a very talented player who could slip because of, again, positional value. But I think teams saw with Brian Branch, for instance, just because he's a little bit of the tweener in the secondary and runs a 4.6, doesn't necessarily mean he should fall out of the first round. And I don't think teams are going to fully make the same mistake again with Jahdae Barron. Nick Scorton at number 28 to the Lions. I think this draft really is a good position for Detroit in the sense that there's a lot of players who kind of fit what they're looking for here, and because of that, I'm going to be having the Lions trade down quite often. This is a team who obviously needs some more secondary pass rush. Whether or not Zadarius Smith returns, I think developing a number 2 alongside Aiden Hutchinson should be the number 1 priority here for the Lions in the draft. And they prefer big, powerful edge rushers who aren't necessarily, the 240-pound Nolan Smiths of the world, but rather guys who are big, can play inside and out, and there's a lot of guys like that. So because of that, I think the Lions can afford to move down. They could go in the second round and pick someone like a Jack Sawyer or a JT Tuimoloau. A few other guys fit that bill. Landon Jackson from Arkansas, I think, makes a lot of sense. But here there's no trades. So at number 28, I had them sticking and picking, drafting Nick Scorton, highly productive edge rusher in his first 2 years at Purdue. A&M had him bulk up a little bit. His role changed. His sack production went down. But I think the Lions are going to see that and like that. He can play at different weights. He can be solid in a few different spots. And I think here at number 28, this would be a solid selection. Luther Burden at number 29 to the Washington Commanders. Former 5-star recruit who was dynamic as a sophomore. Production went down as a junior, but I still think he's good enough to go in the first round. Adding another secondary playmaker alongside Terry McLaurin, Burden operates at his best out at the slot, and I think he would be a very fun addition to the Commanders' passing game. Nick Emmanwori, safety out of South Carolina to the Bills. Not many people have put him in the first round, but I'm all about it. I think when it's all said and done, he'll be one of the first 32 players off the board. And once the NFL Combine ends, you will agree with me. Just watch. Very talented player. The Bills, I think, could look to add some more pieces in that secondary as they get older, have some guys expiring. I think there is a world where Emmanwori is the first safety off the board. I know a few people have mocked it. I'm not ready to go there yet, but I see a world where it happens. Josh Simmons, tackle out of Ohio State, goes to the Kansas City Chiefs at number 31. Their offensive line, particularly, I shouldn't even say their offensive line, but their tackle play was a weak spot for them a year ago. Kingsley Suamataia, who they drafted in the second round, has a long way to go. You can still try to develop him on the side, hope that he turns into something, but you can't necessarily bank on that. Simmons was really good last year before he got injured. A lot of people have him going earlier than this, so I imagine the Chiefs will certainly be more than happy to draft him at number 31. And then Derek Harmon goes to the Eagles here at number 32, the big defensive tackle out of Oregon. Milton Williams, I can't see him coming back. I think he's going to sign a 9-figure contract, and the Eagles just don't really have the means to pay that. They're going to have to pay Jalen Carter in 2 years. They have other guys who they have to work on, and they have a lot of guys who they're already paying a lot of money. So there's going to be some casualties. I think Milton Williams will be one of them. They replace him here with Harmon, who's a really, really good player. The other guy I thought about, who I don't know if you guys noticed I have falling out of the first round, is James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher out of Tennessee. I'm not anti-James Pierce. This is just kind of how the board played out, and I think in this scenario, he'd be one of the first picks of the second round. But his production was a little inconsistent this year. There are some questions of how his skill set translates to the league. There is some noise about character concerns with him. I think those are all things that the Eagles would be willing to look past and draft a player like him. That wouldn't surprise me at all, especially with Josh Sweat also probably leaving. But with the year that Derek Harmon had at Oregon, I can't really see him falling out of the first round, and the Eagles at number 32 will scoop him up. So that'll wrap up the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm excited to have more consistent draft content over the next couple of months. Within the next week or so with the Combine done, I plan on having a 2-round mock draft, probably with trades as well. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.